DC, we just got an interesting question from our caller Jaden about the secondary, and he was kind of wondering about, I guess, why there hadn't been more rotation on the back end yet. Whether it was the coaches didn't think the younger guys were ready, or they wanted to kind of keep them together as a unit. Like when you look at it, obviously there's been some issues in the secondary. What's your assessment of why you haven't seen the rotations there that you've seen at a lot of other position groups?
Was the caller or emailer actually Mike Schaefer? And he was going under a different name.
It didn't sound like him. It didn't sound like him.
Okay. Okay, because my coworker Schaefer and I have kind of gone round and round about this a little bit. He's on that side of it. I'm always more of that guy who's like, I don't know, you can't just make that. I don't want to say knee jerk. That's not what it is, but that move, just to make a move and assume that it's going to be better. I always worry on the back end with all the communication that's involved, even though we have seen some missteps here and there, that it's very difficult at this point for someone to just sort of step right into the fire in these types of games. That doesn't mean it can't be done, but you don't know if you're going to get the same payout or more. And so it would be a pretty big gamble with players who are going to be really good. Don't get me wrong, and I'm excited about what the bowl practices are going to do for those guys. And I think if you go into the bowl game, maybe you do more stuff like that. But for this particular weekend and the previous one, I was the kind of hold the line guy, trust your veterans to play at a higher level and kind of get that communication stuff in order that was maybe missing on occasion against USC and maybe a couple times against Wisconsin, if we're honest.
Hey, BC, for all the ebbs and flows and ups and downs of this year on special teams, is there a world in which you're thinking in Iowa City, man, if Nebraska wins special teams, fill in the blank, and it's a realistic thing?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because if you had said that back around Purdue game, people would have, mocked you.
More than normal.
Yeah. But I was actually going to ask it, but Rhule ended up answering it sort of just on his own about Ed Foley and sort of staying with the process. I thought a question was maybe warranted about how Foley has handled it, because he's certainly a guy who took a lot of criticism in late September. I'm not saying there weren't some things that were out of order with the block kicks and stuff like that, but some of it was basically like you have these 2 or 3 positions within your special teams that if they're not on, everything sort of looks bad, right? Everybody kind of takes that criticism along with like a kicker that's struggling, or in that rare case when it pops up when you're not even snapping the ball well, that falls on like 20, 25 other guys, it seems like, kind of take the brunt of the criticism. So I think I give them credit for not panicking about it and not thinking that everything was on fire just because these 2 or 3 spots needed repairs. Now, there'd still be big problems if suddenly John Hull hadn't come on the way he has. Like we'd be talking about it much the same way. That's just the interesting part of special teams. There's just so much that's reliant, like in this big picture conversation about a group, on a guy's right foot. And if it's like hitting the ball right, it changes everything. And it changes the confidence as I think the offense proceeds when they know they have a kicker to back them up like that. So I think that's one of the great stories of this season is John Hull. And just the Rhule said it after the game. You could tell it's kind of an emotional thing. Like there was practices this year where he didn't make a kick, as the head coach said. Mm-hmm. And you had guys who were still supporting him. You had your Ja'Cory Barney was one of those guys who was like always with him and trying to get him going. And MJ Sherman, I think, was another guy who called him Johnny and was trying to fire him up. And they stuck with that dude and showed confidence in him when they were seeing him, slice it off, into the woods like I'd be doing off the tee. So I think that's probably one of the best stories of this season as far as just a turnaround and the guy showing some real mental strength.
BC, in a weird way, do you think the fact that Rhule was willing to make a move in season and a dramatic one with the offensive coordinator position actually made his decision to stick with Ed Foley feel more, I guess, kind of impactful, right? Because it wasn't a, hey, I'm just not going to do this in season thing anymore. It was a, hey, I'll do what's necessary. I don't think this is necessary.
Yeah, you said it as well as I could spend a bunch of words on. I think that's exactly right. Like, he showed that he has that in his, that he is willing to do that at a big time move, one of the biggest spots on his coaching staff. And so if there's other spots where he's like, let's just see how this plays out. I've coached with these guys a long time. I mean, he's coached with Ed Foley for, decade or more, and then he knows what he's about and like how he prepares guys, and has obviously believed in him before. So it would strike me as strange if a coach like Matt Rhule suddenly, like a month into something when it's sort of going awry, would be like, let's just abandon this, or let's go a complete different direction, when he's in his mind seen a lot of years of work to the contrary that makes him believe in a coach. I remember him last year saying a quote about, it's interesting sometimes a coach who's taking the most criticism on the outside, I think, might be doing a good job because I know all the layers and all the stuff that he's working with, and there might be another guy who's getting propped up a lot by everybody, and not that he's not doing a good job, but maybe he's got a better setup for himself within his room and all that. And so I always try to keep that in mind, that we don't know everything. And that certainly with all that's on the line and winning now, we've heard Rhule say, I'll do what it takes. So if he thinks what it takes is staying put at some spots, you gotta respect that he's at least processing all avenues.
Yeah. So BC, let me ask you something about kind of the coaching perspective and Coach Holgorsen, and this is on the heels of seeing Dylan with the guys and being around Lincoln the last couple of days, kind of having fun. And you saw the tie-dyed purple Adidas outfit last night, kind of living his best life. And how much of is it understated, do you think, that Coach Holgorsen and kind of this new infusion of practice regimen has kind of helped Dylan get past that freshman wall, right, that we sometimes see guys hit emotionally and physically? He seems to be, I don't know this for a fact, but on the outside he seems to be like kind of recharged, or he seems fresh again, with his personality starting to beam a little. Do you think we probably haven't talked enough about that, huh?
Yeah, I think you're right, Damon. I think he does seem that way. Like even after the USC game, there's a little post-game tent we're under, and that was a tough loss. They felt like they could have had that game, and a few plays that Dylan would have wanted back. But he was so steadfast in his belief, like they were going to be better in week 2. Like that's what really stood out to me. And I walked out there and I told Bruns, I was like, they feel like they played like they're going in the right direction right now on offense. And he even said, we'll beat Wisconsin. He said that right there. He said, we're going to play well, we're going to get better, and we're going to beat Wisconsin.
Yeah, but that flew under the radar because it happened.
Yeah. I just think that a lot of guys on offense, and you heard Dana say it yesterday, they didn't have like the points or the numbers necessarily to show for it in Los Angeles. They left some stuff out there, but they knew it was out there and more gettable maybe than it had been, or it felt more in reach. And, also a guy like Dylan's maybe looking at like what they're doing with his buddy Jacory, and you heard Dana yesterday talk about, they were kind of moving him around at 3 different spots, and maybe that's a lot in his head. And, I want a guy just focusing on one spot and doing it really well and playing fast and simplifying. And so I think not only for Dylan's sake, but seeing how others around him were getting that same treatment and the same, okay, this is the direction we're going to go now, and maybe this will help you this way. That probably had to pump him up too, seeing that with other guys also. And so, yeah, I do think there's a definite optimism and lift in their step right now. And it's not like I think people were overly worried like Dylan was going to hit the door or anything. But when you hear Dylan talking about 25 with an eagerness, and you hear Ja'Cory Barney after the game saying this is just a stepping stone, and it seems like he's talking about a future much beyond just the next couple of games. In this era we live in, that always, I think, lifts the fan base up, too, when they see that from two of your prominent freshmen talking that way.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, as you look at kind of Dana Holgorsen's comments yesterday where he's talking about, hey, the guys that perform the best in practice are the guys that are going to see the field. And you've seen that play out at a couple different positions over the last couple of weeks. How do you process that? It doesn't seem like it should be a shift, but a seeming shift away from maybe this philosophy of, hey, we're going to play the guys we think are the best, not just the guys that are showing it the best Monday through Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's important to everybody on the team when they understand, like, there is meaning. If you're going to say there's meaning to what happens on a Wednesday or Thursday, it has to show, like, in the rep count too. Like, if it's going to be stressed 3 days before a game, like, you know, you jump off sides or you have a false start, there's a payment for that. You know, like you're hurting your team with an unforced error, and if it, you know, that's going to happen once in a while. But if it happens, you know, once on a Thursday practice and then you see it again in a Saturday game, that might be enough for a coach to say, you know what, it's not, you got to tighten the screws, and you're going to sit over here for a little bit until you do. And you know, sometimes another guy, like, you know, like we can just talk specifically here in this case, like Borkercher or Lindenmeyer, they've been solid players for this team for a while. And it has to be a huge confidence boost for them to get sort of this treatment from Holgorsen and these reps. And you know, you saw Borkercher when he got the ball in space. That didn't surprise me when he took that little pass that maybe should have been 5 yards and he made it 19. Because I remember thinking in the spring game when he caught that ball on the run, I was like, man, he's a fluid dude. Like he's coming along there. And
I love Borkercher.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be much more a part of it this year, like in the pass catching game. I honestly did. I talked all off season about him as like, stop, don't forget about Borkercher. And so,
well, how come you didn't yell at? You're so soft spoken. Like, come on, BC, help me out. Yeah. I always used to feel guilty. I'm like, is this just because I like him as a person? No, that's not it. He's really good. And I know I tried to get I tried to lobby to get his government name changed to Eddie during the broadcast. I don't think that'd sit well with his parents. I mean, Nate is fine, but he is pretty steady. Like, I just think I know what I'm getting every time he's on the field.
Yeah. And everybody over there sees the stuff. So, you know, the guys on the team, they've seen all offseason, like, you know, Borkercher and Lindenmeyer, they put in the work. Like, they know that. And so it's not going to bother your locker room to see guys like that get rewarded. The other thing I'd say to this, though, I don't know everything, but I know whenever I've interviewed Thomas Fidone, he's been a guy who's been very loyal about this program. He grew up a Husker fan, like dressing up as a Husker, you know, on Halloween and stuff like that. So this has always meant a lot to him to be in this program. So I don't just jump to conclusions. I want to see how it plays out. And I like yesterday when Dana comes in and he's very candid about this is why we did what we did. But you know what? Thomas had two of his best practices this week. So we'll see where that takes it. So, you know, we had a nice story with Borkercher and Lindenmeyer. Maybe we have a nice story on Friday where Fidone gets a big player or two in that game. And so that's the beauty of sports.
I can't believe my guy doesn't have a touchdown.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that. There's some things like that. You could name off like 4 or 5 things. You're like, if you had said this in August, you'd be like, well, what? What's that about?
I thought he'd lead him in receptions too. And so I'm a big. if I was in the lab, I would probably use 75% of his personality to bottle for a player. I like Fedoni.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's wired like his head coach, as the head coach.
And I
always
think
says.
I think that's why Coach Rhule has an affinity for him. I think you're 100% right, BC.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's see where it goes Friday. Like, it was an interesting storyline in the last game. There's no question when one of your starters, main guys, plays only 3 snaps, it's going to get talked about. But I'm hoping that there's some guys over there that maybe they're on they were on the wrong end of it, and and the fact that they didn't play as much or something happened in that regard. Well, let's see how they answer that. So far, when Holgorsen has challenged certain groups or guys, they have seemed to answer that bell. Like you talk about, the perimeter blocking has gotten better. The O-line has played 2 of its best games. The running backs, when challenged to hit some holes better, we've seen some of their best work. So let's see where this one goes.
BC, when talking about whether it's the tight end room or any of these other positions, is the hesitancy to kind of either make these changes or be kind of a hard line, hey, the guys that practice the best are going to play, is the thing that keeps more coaches from that just the inability to stomach the idea in the transfer portal era that you might lose some guys that you just don't want to lose?
That's a great question. I was thinking about that last night. It'd be so hard to coach the way you want to coach sometimes now, I think. I mean, because you are always like, there has to be that fear if you're real about it. Like with a certain player, if you think like he could really help us a year from now, but if like, his reps dwindle these last few games, what does that mean, as you head into this crazy December? And it is going to be crazy. There's no doubt about that. So I think there's no doubt that weighs on coaches' minds. I don't know. There's probably some coaches who are able to get a little bit past it and just be like, I got to do this the way I've done it, the way I believe in. And but there probably is some balancing act there that they have to, they're on a tightrope, I think, a little bit with that. And that this is where maybe it helps, where you get, in this case, you have sort of fresh eyes on it. Everybody kind of understands that in Holgorsen. So there's that element that maybe people get like, okay, this guy has a pretty accomplished resume. He just came in from the outside, and his initial look at it is producing these thoughts. Maybe that helps somewhat with players, and they can take it the way they should take it and build off of it. But it's a really fascinating question you brought up that I don't think has an easy answer, and I don't think coaches think it has an easy answer.
So, BC, do you think this will be one of those years where, considering what's going on and how the season's played out, and we have new eyeballs and we have roster limit discussions, where this would be the year where I think fans would not be up in arms over whatever happens in the portal? Kind of, is the expectation level already being set that there should be a fair amount of movement?
Yeah, I think it'll be helped. There are going to be days, and there'll be I'm sure a name or so where it does hit harder. But I wish Malachi the best. But maybe people were sort of built up for it because it was, the news had kind of traveled that was a possibility before Rhule made it known. But I didn't see like an overwhelming or just a panicked reaction about a player who was a big recruit and obviously a local guy. And I didn't think that was disrespectful toward Malachi or what he can do wherever he goes next. It was just more what you're talking about. I do think there are people understanding it's going to be how it's going to be with some guys, and we just got to see how this all how it filters out and you get it down to 105. But I mean, it's just simple math, right? I mean, people are looking at it, they're like, they got to get rid of 35 somehow. I better get my stomach ready for whatever's going to happen because it's just coming.
There may be some surprises, but I just think if there's any off season for the fan base to probably just chill, I bet it's this one.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't think they'll be near the hand wringing and consternation because, as Ravi likes to say, much like Thanos, it's inevitable.
Well, I hope you speak that to truth. I hope that's what ends up happening.
Well, you don't want to see 107 posts and 6 pages of on your message board.
Well, that keeps the wheel spinning for the message board. So I guess I'm all right with that. But hopefully people keep cool heads about it. It's going to be a kind of a crazy December like we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So just buckle up and kind of embrace it, and keep some leftover turkey rations in your refrigerator, freezer in case you need it on certain nights. I mean, all that, like everything's got to be. You just got to be at the ready for this. It's going to be a wild month, but at least we got a bowl game, And if you want to talk to a guy who's excited about writing just a Tuesday bowl practice report on December 10th, I'm that kind of guy. Like, I'm excited that we have that again. So that'll help balance it out a little bit too.
I'm just excited that DB is apparently living in Candyland, where he thinks there's going to be a drama-free off season. That's great for him.
Candyland. Wow.
Yeah, remind him of that one of these days in like 3 weeks when someone laughs and people are losing their mind.
BC, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you again soon. Have a good holiday.
Thanks, BC.